Everybody's favorite symbiote returns to star in his very own big-budget blockbuster. But can you have the old tongue lasher without the webhead? Find out when Johnnie Torch reviews Venom. Welcome in, everyone, to the Johnnie Torch Live broadcast, number 118 today. And we are going to talk about Venom, the movie, or the major motion picture, as they might have said in years gone by. Full spoiler warning here. We're going to go deep into the symbiote named Venom, and we are going to talk about it in detail for the next half hour, 45 minutes or so. So be forewarned. Okay, first off, I'll try to give some non-spoiler type summation of the movie. Uh, I overall enjoyed it. I liked it a lot. Uh, I can see why some folks didn't like it. Now, there's sort of a backlash in the fan community that critics pretty much savaged this film. And, I can honestly see why. I'm not going to pretend like, you know, I can't understand why anybody would, you know, give a poor review to this film. But at the same time, this does deliver on the promise of Venom. This is Venom. If you like Venom, I would highly recommend you see this film. I don't suffer the pretentious gladly. And I think a lot of critics and maybe even fans are somewhat biased against this film because it is not part of the MCU. Not wholeheartedly. It supposedly has one foot in the MCU. This could happen somewhere in the corner of the MCU that hasn't been identified yet. Also, because there's a stigma against Sony to begin with. Some would say after Spider-Man 2. Personally, I liked Spider-Man 3 as well, but they really haven't done very much positive in the Spider-Man universe. And others are going to complain that Spider-Man, who, as a purist myself, would argue that Spider-Man should have been a part of the Venom origin. But, of course, situations being as they are, he is, and I don't think it's a spoiler to say, completely omitted from the proceedings. Having said that, I think they delivered on the promise of a Venom movie. They gave you everything that you would want in a Venom movie that didn't have Spider-Man in it. The action was very good. The acting was very good, particularly by Tom Hardy, which we'll get into in a moment. The visual realization of Venom, the voice of Venom, all very good. And so I would give this a recommendation. I would probably say, like I said, the pretentious among us who or hoping for something on par with Avengers Infinity War or Black Panther. If you're looking for something that's like an epic game changer, which honestly, in my personal opinion, I didn't think Infinity War or Black Panther was an epic game changer, to be totally honest with you. I liked them well enough, but to me, they're just sort of another part of the MCU machine. I didn't really feel that they were standouts, to be totally honest, and I'm always totally honest with you. But if you're looking for something with that type of, you know, oomph, you're probably not going to get it with Venom. This is more akin to, I would say, Suicide Squad. I think Suicide Squad opened to pretty positive reviews from at least the fan community. And over time, people started sort of talking it down and being like, well, it's not really that good, and so on and so forth. Between the two, Venom is probably the better movie, but I would say that that's kind of what you should be expecting. I think it's sort of in line with, a good attempt at a franchise that, you really couldn't expect a whole lot of. I wouldn't expect a whole lot out of a solo Venom movie, but it exceeded my expectations. You go in there with too lofty an expectation and you might be disappointed. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. But I think it's on par with Suicide Squad, Ant-Man and the Wasp, maybe, if you're looking for an MCU equivalent. So that's it for the spoiler-free portion, and I would give you spoiler warning now. Anything from here on out, it could be deemed a spoiler. Okay, so we start off with the spaceship crash that brings the symbiotes to Earth. I believe there was, I can't remember what they said, 3, 5, something like that. A couple of containers of symbiotes brought to Earth. There's an Easter egg. Jameson is the first one to be possessed by one of the symbiotes, which turns out to be Riot, which I have to admit, I was never up on Venom too much in the comics. This was around the point where I was starting to lose interest in comics, around the early 90s when I was a kid, a teenager. And I slowly started phasing out the books. And I don't know, Spider-Man was probably one of the last 3 titles I read on a, well, weekly basis, because back then they started going to like a weekly format. And I kind of lost interest around the time Venom really took over prominence in the Spider-Man titles. So I'm not familiar with too many of the symbiotes beyond Venom and Carnage, of course, and we'll talk more about Carnage later. So Riot is the bad guy in this film. He's the bad guy symbiote. And so, yeah, I thought that was pretty cool they made Jameson referenced here, because I honestly would have been disappointed if they didn't. And of course, for those of you who don't know, John Jameson is, of course, the son of J. Jonah Jameson. And he becomes the Man-Wolf in the comics. He was in Spider-Man 2 as Mary Jane's fiance. They've still yet to do something with John Jameson. I personally, being a big fan of the werewolf characters, I would love to see them do, either Man-Wolf in a Spider-Man movie or maybe even a solo Man-Wolf film. But, Sony is going to keep doing these, especially with the success of this film. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a Man-Wolf solo film somewhere down the line if they continue to be successful. Supposedly a Kraven the Hunter film is in the pipeline. Is it Black and Sable still, or is it just Black Cat? I'm not sure. And also a Morbius movie, which is, I believe, getting prepped to shoot the beginning of next year with Jared Leto playing Michael Morbius. So we get the John Jameson Easter egg, and apparently we don't know if he survives because they kind of make that pretty vague, but I would think he could survive. They don't really show that the symbiotes destroy their hosts unless they have significant time to degenerate their bodies from the inside. So I think maybe John Jameson could come back. We really don't get a good look at him. He's just like an unconscious person that, springs up like a zombie. So they could recast it. They could do something with it if they really chose to. But anyhow, that was a positive for me. I like that they did something like that. I think even the animated series, the famous 90s Spider-Man animated series, which was probably my favorite animated version of Spider-Man, it did have John Jameson somehow responsible for the symbiotes coming to Earth, I believe. So anyway, the villain of the piece is Carlton Drake, and he's played by Riz Ahmed, who I liked him in this film especially. He was the pilot, as they told you about 75 times in Rogue One, in Star Wars Rogue One. He played a good villain, I think. He played sort of the slick and sinister, kind of slimy, sure of himself, entrepreneur type, and had a very large disregard for human life as long as he was furthering his research and ambitions. I thought he played it very well, because one could argue that when Riot eventually takes over him later on, Riot is as buff as Venom, and Riz Ahmed is not a buff individual, but he was the right actor for this part, I think, and he did pull it off very well. I don't necessarily suppose you need a buff actor to play the symbiote, because Venom ultimately is bigger than Eddie. But a lot of complaints that I've heard about particularly Topher Grace's Venom is that he wasn't buff enough, and Eddie is supposed to be super buff and this and that. I might as well make the comparisons right now between this film and Spider-Man 3. Now, as you may or may not know, I'm a huge fan of Spider-Man 3. I actually like it more than Spider-Man 2, which is blasphemous in some circles. Not as good as the first Spider-Man, though. The first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, Sam Raimi Spider-Man, is the gold standard, in my opinion. But I like it, and I don't know what you would, arguably, I think this is probably the more accurate incarnation of Venom, because Venom is actually a fully realized character in this film. In Spider-Man 3, it's basically Eddie with the goo on him. You know what I mean? Here, Venom is a fully fledged character, a fully fleshed out character. So, in that respect, yeah, this is the better Venom. The way that Raimi tied in Venom to the Spider-Man story, though, I think was really cool, where Eddie is sort of the anti Peter Parker. He's sort of, he's sort of on the same wavelength as him, but he makes all the wrong choices where Peter generally made the right ones. Peter's kind of a jerk in that film, but uh, generally that, Eddie is the evil doppelganger, so to speak, of Peter. And when he's given the symbiote, rather than resist its evil impulses, he ends up embracing them. So I think that both Venoms served their story well. I think Venom was realized as well as could be realized in Spider-Man 3, given the context and the framework of that film. In this film, Venom is more of the comic accurate incarnation. So, you know, for purists' sake, I would say that yes, this Venom is the better incarnation. Uh, let's go on to talking about the violence. Now, as you know, this film was rated PG-13, and I was skirting on not seeing this film because I generally don't see R-rated films, at least in theater, because I'm not a big gore fan. I don't like splatter gore and stuff, and it's a little bit different on television where you're in a lightened room, a smaller television screen. It's a little bit different than being in the theater. But I felt that this was not a film that needed graphic and gratuitous violence. I mean, we get some scenes of Venom biting off people's heads, and I didn't really need to see the gory remains. I mean, you get the idea, and it's put across, indelibly well. And I don't see why people would squawk and complain about this unless you have a gore fetish and that's sort of your thing. And I no judgment. I'm not saying that's wrong, but I'm saying in terms of the story here, you don't need it really. And you probably, I would say undoubtedly, are going to get the unrated cut at some point on DVD and Blu-ray. So you really lose nothing. That's kind of what I say about Deadpool. I mean, they're supposedly going to make a Deadpool PG-13 cut or some kind of film for the end of this year. And I'm all for that. You don't really need to have the raunchiness and the gore in order to find the character appealing. And it's the same thing here. So I just wanted to get that out of the way right now. I don't see where a lot of people, and this will tie into the cutting of the film, the editing of the film. I don't see where a lot of people could feel that uh, this was edited down by any stretch. This doesn't feel like it's been, cut up and haphazardly put together. Like, for instance, The Amazing Spider-Man, that film, the web film with Andrew Garfield. That film did feel like it was cut up and there was pieces missing, and they just, sort of slapdashed it together. This does not feel like that. I cannot see frames of this film that feel like they're missing. The only thing that I think is probably missing is, maybe some of the more gratuitous gore shots of him, you know, biting people's heads off or impaling them or something. That might be in the director's cut or something, but there's no story beats here that are missing. And of course, Tom Hardy did say that some of his favorite parts of the film have been cut. I think there was 40 minutes of the film cut. But I think what that means mostly is that he probably got some more, character moments, some interplay between he and Venom that honestly I would love to see as well. But for the sake of pacing, sometimes, those things need to go. And this film comes in at a pretty brisk, I don't know, 90 minutes. I think 95 minutes. I'm not sure. I wasn't looking at my watch during the film. It was very entertaining, but it comes in at just the right pace. So to put in the extra half hour or make it over 2 hours, I think would have been overkill. It's paced very well. I would say my biggest problem with the film is that despite the pacing being good, it still felt pretty boring in the first, I want to say, 20 minutes. Again, I'm just guessing, and I've seen it only once, but I think the first 20 minutes are pretty slow, and it's by necessity. This is an origin movie, and you can't really begin with. I mean, I suppose you could have, begun with a flashback or something where he's already Venom and he's thinking back or something. That might have worked. But after the crash and after we see the riot symbiote escape, we just basically spend the next 20 minutes or so learning about Eddie and his life. He's with his pretty girlfriend, Anne, played by Michelle Williams. Michelle Williams was also very good. I'm not too familiar with her as an actress. I think I might have seen her in one movie. I can't remember. I think, wasn't she in one of the I don't know if she was in one of the Mission Impossible films, the Bourne films. She was in something I think I've seen her in, but she's generally pretty good. And again, she was pretty good here. I mean, not a whole lot was required of her, I don't suppose, for this film, but she still managed to pull off a convincing, lawyer or whatever she was. And we see Eddie as a journalist. We see that he kind of is an instigator. He's a firebrand, and he jeopardizes his relationship with Anne because he, sneaks into her files to find out about Carlton Drake. He jeopardizes his career by, going against the boss because the boss doesn't want him to, initiate any kind of conflict with Drake because he's such a powerful guy. And this is sort of where Spider-Man's presence, I think, was, felt wanting in the origin. They had to basically base it on Carlton Drake being the person responsible for ruining Eddie's life. They always say with the Joker, it's like, oh, one bad day can ruin your life forever. And in this film, it's something like that, but with Carlton Drake instead of like Spider-Man 3, where it was Peter Parker basically inadvertently, or in some cases advertently, ruining Eddie's life. And that's kind of the thing that they hang their hat on in the comics and in the cartoons, where it's, because of Eddie being sort of, hothead, and he just sort of creates his own problems. And I think they made that pretty clear in this film. So that was pretty good as well. And so let's talk about Tom Hardy. Tom Hardy was excellent in this film. And I would say, I don't know, an Oscar? Maybe? Maybe? I honestly don't think that any other actor could have done this role and had it been convincing. That's about the highest praise I can give Tom Hardy for this film. I cannot think of another actor who is good enough that would have played this as convincing. There are some people that could have played it as, you know, talking to yourself, so to speak, and stuff. But there's something so pitiable about Tom Hardy's Eddie. And it's not pitiable in a sense that he's like, emasculated or, you know, like a wimp or something, but you just take a look at his face in this image that I've got up here. And you could tell he's got the countenance of a haunted man where his demons are literally coming out. And, that is so effective. And a lot of people, I've heard a couple of complaints, people saying that, Hardy looks, really, sweaty and bloated and really put through the ringer in this film. But that's kind of what you need for this character, for this part. My brother said that I seen it with my brother and my brother-in-law, and he said it was more funny than he thought it was going to be. And that's another thing. I didn't really expect this film to be as funny as it was. And a lot of people are saying, well, it's unintentionally funny. It's more often you're laughing at it than with it. I don't know if that's exactly true. I don't know if I'd say that. I think all the parts that I laughed at, I think it was intentional that they made them funny. As I said, in the beginning, we have Eddie, at the restaurant, and he ends up getting into the lobster tank and eating the lobster. I mean, that's stuff that was like, I think that's played pretty broad. I think the intention was to have people laugh at that. So some of the stuff at the beginning, when he's eating and right after he's gotten the symbiote. And that was pretty clever the way they had him. He's sort of fed up. He's sort of gotten to the point where Drake has taken so much from him that he wants to get something back. And I can understand him going back at that point. And they had a little tie-in that was also pretty clever, because then they had that scene with Marie, I think was her name. She was like the homeless woman that was selling free newspapers, and he gives her $20. And at the time, when you first see that, I was like, oh, they're trying to humanize Eddie. Oh, isn't he such a nice guy? He's going to give $20 to a homeless woman that, he's, seen on the street maybe a couple of times. And originally, I thought that she was going to be sort of in Rocky, in the original Rocky movie, there was the little Marie scene, which honestly, you know, for years and years, I thought was an unnecessary scene. It's just oh, look, Rocky's such a nice guy. He doesn't want, I think a friend of his sister to be hanging on the streets when she's 13 years old or whatever. And it's like maybe a 2-minute scene. And it's like, you could have cut that for pacing. We wouldn't have thought any less of Rocky for it. And then later on comes Rocky Balboa, and she becomes a pivotal character for at least that movie. And that's, kind of what I felt happened here. I think, ironically, both characters are named Marie, where it does tie into why Eddie tries to, when he's in the laboratory, save her, because he knows her and he has some kind of, relationship with her, for lack of a better term. And that's what, gives him the impulse to smash the window, which ends up causing him to receive the symbiote. So I thought that was very good, the way that they managed to do that. Because again, my biggest question was, how is Venom going to end up inhabiting Eddie? And I thought that was a reasonable situation. So we have Drake sort of experimenting on people, and like I said, a lot of this, I don't want to say was unnecessary, but I did feel sort of that it was dragging for the first 20 minutes. And I could see people with a moderate to short attention span getting antsy with the first 20 minutes. Now, I'm with the origin story. I believe that an origin story for a superhero, or in this case, an anti-hero, should be patiently told. I don't believe in just slapdashing the origin together and moving on. That's kind of something that happened with like Batman '89, where you just have the quickie cameo of how he became. And I kind of always enjoy more when you get into the build up of how the hero becomes the hero, or the villain becomes the villain, and not just try to cut corners and get there faster just for the sake of expediency. But like I said, it's a double-edged sword. You're either going to feel impatient that it's taking so long for Venom to fully emerge, which he does fully emerge, which takes about 35 minutes, I think, before we actually see the full-formed Venom. And, that will be on you, what your tolerance level for that is. The action scenes. Let's talk a little bit about the action. At that point was really cool, where he's getting away from Drake's men, and the motorcycle chase. Very, very exciting. This film did have a very 90s, late 80s, early 90s feel to it. The the over the top action beats and stuff like that. That was really fun. That's, like I said, it's big goofy fun. You know what I mean? If you're gonna try to take this too seriously, you're not gonna get very far. I actually liked the scene where he was escaping from the compound, the laboratory, the first time. That was actually really cool, where he's busting down the door and he climbs the tree and stuff like that. That I thought was very exciting and very intense. And you really feel for him in the moment there. It didn't really feel like movie action, like, let's say, the motorcycle scene. That was a very much more human scene, where you're feeling like, you know, get out of harm's way, Eddie. And you kind of, at least I did, connect to him more in that scene, where he's trying to get away and he really doesn't understand why he's got this sort of augmented abilities. All right, so let's talk about the relationship between Eddie and Venom. That was probably the best part. That was the highlight for me. I think a lot of people that have seen the movie have said that as well. The conversations between Venom and Eddie were the high point. Wish we had more of them. I think they were used judiciously enough, though, to leave us wanting more. And that's always a tightrope to walk. How much is too much? And, you don't want to leave the audience dissatisfied with not enough, but then again, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. You got to save a little something for the sequel. And I think by the end of the movie, we get to see the rapport between Venom and Eddie. And that's, where we can go in the second film. And this one, they're still trying to, come to terms with each other and stuff. That was good. That was good the way they had it. Venom apparently, and I love that they called him Venom very early on. They didn't play around with, actually they did that with Carnage though, but they didn't play around with, Eddie saying some kind of, you know, double entendre, such as, I feel like I'm filled with venom. Oh, and then the symbiote doesn't have a name, but that's kind of like the cue to the audience. Oh, he's got venom in him, something like that. I was expecting something cute like that, particularly from a Sony film. But they went for it. They went for it with both hands. They grabbed it by the neck and they said, "This is Venom." He comes right out and he says, "We are Venom." So this is really cool. The voice actor was really good. I don't know who the voice actor was. I'm not sure. I can look at my notes here on the cast. Nah, I don't see it. But he was really good. He sounded like the voice of Zoom from The Flash Season 2, which is that really, distinct voice. Really cool. The look of Venom was really good. Reminiscent a bit of Spider-Man 3 when he was in, glob form, so to speak. But then when they fully form him as a, formed with Eddie, he looked like he was straight from the comics. I mean, the consistency, so to speak, of Venom, like I said, it was just really spot on, and the design was spot on. They had everything right: the eyes, the teeth, the tongue, everything that you expect from Venom. Uh, like I said, I honestly never read Venom too much in the comics. I just remember the toy. I remember. I think my brother had it. Maybe I had it. I don't know. But you press the button on the back, and he says, "I'm going to eat your brain." And of course, the parents of America weren't really too happy about that, and I don't think they emphasize that too much anymore. But apparently, Venom likes to eat people or body parts or things like that, and he was intending on taking over Earth, I think, and he changes his mind because he feels a kinship with Eddie, and he says, "Where I come from, I was a loser, kind of like you." And that was just priceless. That was great. Like I said, the rapport between them two, the elevator scene, which everybody's gonna probably remark was the funniest thing in the theater I was in. Anyway, everybody was laughing. Lots of stuff was very funny between him and Venom. The talking to himself constantly. I liked the like I said at the end of the film where he's basically trying to play matchmaker between him and Anne. Let's talk about that for a second. I want to donate a little time to that. She had the boyfriend here. I don't know what his name was in the movie. Reed Scott, I think, is the actor's name. I forget what his name was, Dan or something. But yeah, it's like she ended up going out with this doctor guy, and he was really a salt of the earth guy. It was kind of cool and refreshing that he didn't seem like he was like some kind of put upon, struggling with this whole thing that's happening guy. He sort of genuinely cared about Eddie as a patient. You know what I mean? I thought that was pretty cool to play him that way, and he did good in this film. Um, One of the funniest things that I liked was the dog when Venom when Venom ends up going into the dog, and the dog is like standing in the middle of the hallway, and Anne sees him. That was so funny with the way he gets out of the well, it's not really a like a chamber, but it's like that enclosed room. And they show Venom's weakness, which is something that I think if you've seen any of the cartoons or anything, in the Spider-Man 3 movie, that that's Venom's main weakness, which is the sound waves and stuff. And so they showed that very well, and then he gets separated from Eddie, and then Eddie gets captured, and that was all done very well as well, because I think it added to the stakes. You don't know if, you know, Eddie's gonna rebond with him. Of course, we know as comic fans, but it's probably healthier for Eddie if he doesn't. Although that was also pretty funny, where Venom keeps telling him, you know, I can fix it, and you know, because his internal organs are suffering, and you know, the separation, and then he gets captured, and then you know, he's helpless now, Eddie, and it's up to Venom to save him. And you know, again, when I was a kid and you know, a teenager, an early teenager, when Venom was kind of the big thing, you know, I always saw him as the bad guy, and they kind of put him over as a, I think they called him the lethal protector, because that was the big thing in the 90s. That's why I really didn't like 90s comics. You had the lethal protector all the time. You had popularity really on the rise for characters like the Punisher, Ghost Rider, Venom, Wolverine, guys that got their hands dirty by killing the bad guys more often than not. Even Batman, kind of, they pushed in that direction over on in DC, even though I don't think he went so far as to kill. They still didn't really embrace that with Batman there. But again, you know, they managed to make Venom, you know, an anti-hero, a, you know, lethal protector, as they called him. And I think it works. I think it works. I mean, the way you make Venom heroic is to make the other symbiotes more evil than him. So he kind of has a second thought, Venom, about taking over, and now Riot is the main villain, and he still wants to take over, and he's trying to coax Venom back to his side, and that's basically the major plan. You know, Riot ends up taking over Drake, and they are going to go back to the symbiote planet and bring back the symbiotes so they can populate the world and feed on humanity and take over. Now, I like a lot, and I'm pretty sure this is something that probably rubbed the critics wrong as well, which is they really don't spend a lot of time explaining anything about the symbiote planet. They don't go into detail. They don't say, this is where our planet is, this is where we came from, this is what we do, this is why we do what we do. They didn't give any of that. It was just black goo bad. They want to take over, and there's a bunch of them. And if they can go and bring back the rest of them, we're going to have World War III or annihilation. And that's it. It's as simple as that, and it's summed up in basically 2 sentences. That's what's going to happen. That's what we have to avoid. And for people that are looking for like a more complex plot or backstory towards that, you're not going to get it. And that's fine with me, because again, with a comic book, you really don't need all those details, really. You just need to know that there is something to what's being said here. And that's, you know, the threat. The threat is real. And we see it in Riot. Oh, and then there's the scene before we get to the very end here and finish it off. We get the scene with Anne as Venom, or Lady Venom, I guess is what she's been called. And that was really cool. She looks like I think she will probably turn out to be some kind of Venom in the future, you know, in one of the sequels, which, from what I understand, they are signed to, I think, a 3-movie deal, both her and Hardy. And yeah, she looked great as Venom. And, you know, there's the kiss, which was pretty cool. And I'm surprised that wasn't as controversial as it could be, given this climate, because later on Anne says that was basically Venom's idea, that she might not have been fully behind that choice to kiss Eddie, but Venom sort of made her do it. Mm. But yeah, that was pretty cool. I didn't really see any problem though with the fact that he was like kissing Venom, because you got to remember, you know, the person that Venom is attached to is the host, and he is not really like part of the physiology, I guess, so to speak, of the person. So I didn't see that as quite as weird as I think some people did, but I don't know. That's probably up to you. So the big finish, there's the big fight. Now, this is something I didn't understand either, which was Why did Riot have the ability to produce sharp weapons and Venom didn't? I don't know if that's because Venom is not as far along in his development or something that he couldn't create weapons and stuff like that, and we're not told that either. And I would have preferred if they had a line or two that would have explained it. But again, not the end of the world. It's a really cool fight. A lot of people are saying that it was kind of blurry or whatever, that you got two blobs of black goo fighting in a darkened backdrop is obviously kind of challenging to keep up with. But I didn't really have a problem with it. It reminded me a lot of The Incredible Hulk, which is one of my favorite Marvel films, where you have the two big beasties going at it, the Hulk and Abomination. Felt reminiscent of that, which I thought was really cool. Felt pretty brutal and stuff. And Eddie gets killed, kind of. I don't think he was really dead. I don't think Venom could. I mean, we got to look at the regenerative uh, proclivities that Venom has. So he probably could take him from the brink of death and restore him, which was cool. And then you had sort of the noble sacrifice that Venom makes to separate from Eddie and try to save Eddie from the explosion. Of course, Anne makes herself useful by using the sonic wave thing again. And Drake looks like he's a goner. I think he's done. He served his purpose. I don't think we really need him in the future. So that was okay. Riot probably gone as well. But again, I didn't really know him from the comics. I don't really know much about him other than he's just a bad Venom. I guess he's a bad guy version of Venom, like an even eviler version of Venom. So they kind of leave it as a, is Venom dead? Is Venom not dead? And come to find out, he still has Venom, which was really cool at the end. And we got the Stan Lee cameo. Always love seeing Stan Lee in these movies. That really wasn't expected, but because it's a Sony film, I wasn't expecting it. But it was ruined for me because I think 2 or 3 people online mentioned it, which I don't know why they do that. I mean, in a case like this, I mean, he's going to be in an MCU movie. You really don't know so much in a Sony movie or a Fox movie. So, but that was cool to see him again. I don't know how many more cameos Stan's got in him. I mean, you know, at 95, you can only imagine he's going to be probably calling it quits soon. I mean, not passing away, God forbid, that could happen anytime, but I don't know when he might say that's enough. I don't really see Stan Lee calling it quits for cameos. I think he likes it. I think as long as he could just sit down at a table and just say 2 words, he would probably still do them. But it was nice to see him again. Yeah, they leave the door open a little bit for possibly a relationship between he and Anne again in the future. Like I said, I'm guessing a sequel will probably have her become a she-Venom or something. I don't know. That's a possibility. You don't want to overcrowd these films with symbiotes because obviously we got the after credit scene which sets up Carnage. Oh yes, and that was so cool. You got Woody Harrelson. You got Woody Harrelson in a straitjacket with a big curly red wig. I mean, come on. You can't get any more of a take my money now. You can't get any more of a cliffhanger than that if you want to see a Venom sequel. I mean, that's what you want to see, and that is going to give it to you in spades. And I don't know what he was writing on the wall, apparently in his own blood. I don't know. But yeah, he was like, says something along the lines of something like, I'm going to get out. I'm going to get out. When I get out, it's going to be Carnage. And of course, that's that's the name drop in case anybody, possibly hasn't heard of Carnage. They can look it up, But yeah, Cletus Cassidy, I remember Carnage. Just like I said, that's when they really wanted to make Venom a hero. They had to get someone who was like the slime of the earth and a serial killer. And, I don't remember, he killed his grandmother or something. I don't know. He's just a bad dude and crazy as a loon. And so now with a symbiote around him, you're asking for trouble. You're asking for trouble. Then we waited for the final post-credit scene, and that one was a bit of a letdown. I was expecting something, to be honest with you, about Morbius, the movie. I thought they were going to try to throw a bone to Morbius and just have, some kind of, Dr. Morbius has arrived in America or something like that. I would have loved to have seen Tom Holland maybe looking at a newspaper and seeing in the Daily Bugle something about a creature, Venom or something, and him being, interested in it or something. But of course, that wasn't going to happen. I mean, because you could say that cameo takes place before Infinity War. Spoilers if you haven't seen Infinity War. But it was the Into the Spider-Verse. It was a clip of the film where, again, I saw the new trailer before the movie. Haven't talked about the new trailer because I'm really not interested in this movie. It's basically all the different versions of Spider-Man in all different kinds of universes. You have Spider-Ham, which I liked as a kid reading those comics. Spider-Gwen, Miles Morales, of course, being the star. Peter Parker as sort of like an aging, I don't know, it's sort of a blasé Spider-Man that I really don't care about and can't get behind. And I don't know, it's like Miles Morales is dragging him around on a web, unconscious, through the streets while he's wearing a Halloween costume. Looks weird, but the animation is good. The animation looks good. I'm probably going to skip that one, maybe see it on cable. Doesn't really appeal to me, but I saw the clip they showed. It was amusing enough. Would I say you need to stay through the credits to see that? If you're impatient, no, you don't need to see that unless you're very interested in Into the Spider-Verse. So I think that's about it. That should just about wrap it up. What am I looking forward to in Venom 2? Again, we got Carnage. Would this be the place where Spider-Man figures in? Could they get Spider-Man back to... Because supposedly that is the reason why these Venom films are going to be PG-13, including the next one with Carnage, because they want to be able to fold Spider-Man into their universe. And what I think they're going to do is I don't know how many films Tom Holland has on his MCU contract. He did Homecoming, he did Civil War, he did Infinity War. He's scheduled for Spider-Man Far From Home and Avengers 4, the as yet untitled Avengers 4. That's 5 films. If I remember correctly, I think 5 films are all he has on his contract. If anything, he possibly is scheduled for a 3rd Spider-Man solo film. You would think that's kind of what they do, where they are leading up to what I would imagine would be Sinister Six. Okay, that's probably 2 years away. They're probably going to do a sequel to Venom in that time, where we're going to have Venom versus Carnage. Then probably, I would say, what will pass for Venom 3 will have Spider-Man in it, the Tom Holland Spider-Man, because I think what Sony has done is they agreed to give the MCU Spider-Man, they're co-sharing rights, so to speak. And they're going to have the MCU build up a background for Spider-Man. They're going to give you the good, Spider-Man, the Tom Holland, because, that was part of the arrangement. MCU got to pick the actor. And they did a great job with Tom Holland. They're going to build up the world. They're going to build up the Sinister Six and things like that. And then while this is happening, Sony is building up their solo properties, which are Venom, Kraven, whatever. And what's going to happen is eventually, after the 5-film contract with Disney, or the 6 films, whatever it is, runs out, probably, I don't know, 2022, something like that, Sony will assume the rights to Spider-Man again, the character, and they will be allowed to bring Tom Holland back, or, Tom Holland there in the first place, and they will plug him into all the universes that they have set up. Or I guess I should say all the franchises they set up in their universe, and have him plug away in all those movies. So we'll get Spider-Man in Venom 3. We'll get Tom Holland Spider-Man in Kraven 2. We'll get Tom Holland Spider-Man in Morbius, number 2. Black Cat, number 2, or maybe the first one, depending on how long it takes for them to make that. I think that's their way of re-energizing their Spider-Man universe, because they'll take an already fully formed Spider-Man with the fully embraced, at least by most people, embraced Spider-Man actor Tom Holland. They've got the world set up. They've already cast Aunt May and several other characters. And they'll just be able to fold much of that into their Sony world once the agreement with Disney expires. Okay, so that's what I think is going to happen. That's where I think we will see a collaboration between Venom and Spider-Man. I think it will happen. I think it'll happen in the future. And to be honest with you, I honestly think that it can't be any worse. I mean, I don't like what they've done with Spider-Man in Marvel in the MCU. I will just come right out and say it now. I was on the fence for a while. I loved Spider-Man in Civil War. That's about it. Homecoming, I don't feel that they really did him justice as a character, and I think, and again, Tom Holland's a great actor. Don't get me wrong. I just don't like the rest of the world. I don't like what they're doing with Aunt May. I don't like the aversion to Uncle Ben, mentioning him, showing him in flashback, talking about what happened to him. I don't like the complete woke casting of his, you know, classmates and his extended supporting cast. I don't like giving him a sidekick in Ned. I don't like the AI suit. I don't like him being a sidekick to Iron Man. I don't like really what they've done with Spider-Man. Infinity War was just a sort of a minor extrapolation from Homecoming. They didn't change a whole lot. He's still sort of the underling of Tony Stark. So if we get him away from the MCU and we do have a good actor in Tom Holland, I would welcome it at this point, especially if Sony gives the amount of care to their other productions, such as Craven and so forth, as they have with Venom. Because I honestly, you see, I knew Venom would work. You know, I wasn't assured of its success, but I knew that if you're going to do any of Spider-Man's villains in a solo film, it should work with Venom because, like I said, he's got the lethal protector angle that you could play up, where there's always a more evil symbiote than him out there. And you've got the reluctant hero style thing with Eddie Brock. Now, when it comes to Kraven the Hunter, what can you do with Kraven the Hunter? Who's he going to hunt if not Spider-Man? Is he going to hunt big game? Who wants to see that for 2 hours? Morbius. I mean, that's cool and everything. Everybody loves vampires, but do we really need another vampire story? What are they going to do? I mean, I don't get it. Black Cat could be cool, but again, we're talking about a 16-year-old Spider-Man at this point, and if they, it depends on what they do with Black Cat, because if you want to have Black Cat amorous for Spider-Man in sequels, you really can't do that unless they're going to cast like a 16-year-old Black Cat, and that's not really what the Black Cat is. She was, an adult back when Peter was a college student and so forth. So we've got a ways to go before we get Tom Holland there, and they're already planning to make this movie. So I don't really know how that's going to work either. All right, so to wrap it up, I would say, yeah, I would put this film above the 3 most recent Spider-Man solo films. It's better than the Amazing Spider-Man 2. It's better than Homecoming. It's much better than the Amazing Spider-Man. That's if you want to put it on the Spider-Man playlist and where you would place it. I still think that the 3 Raimi films are the gold standard. The claim to fame for Spider-Man in cinema is the Raimi films. That's the gold standard. If I were to give this film a rating, I would say 4 out of 5 stars. I'm giving Venom 4 out of 5 stars. And I think that's a very respectable rating. That's sort of an A minus B plus. I would say maybe I'm leaning more toward B plus at this point, having only seen it once. It could grow on me even more though later. I don't know, but it's kind of how I feel about, like, I don't know. I'd say like maybe the Tim Story Fantastic Four films. Um, because I really like them. They're not perfect, but they're really good. It's I kind of feel that's something like this. As I said, maybe if they tightened up the first half hour a little bit more, I might have bounced it up a little bit more. It's like a 4.5. But like I said, I think 4 stars is a pretty respectable rating. That would be the equivalent of maybe an 8 out of 10 if you like the the 1 through 10 scale. I never really like that scale because I very rarely give things a 1 or 2 or 3 on a 10-point system. If it's a 1, 2, or 3, I'm probably going to shut it off and walk out the room. You know what I mean? I don't wait for it to go that low before, just giving up on it. Like the least I could probably give something would be a 4 and say that's basically if you have nothing else to do and you just leave it on in the background while you're ironing your shirts or something. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. Like I said, give it a chance. I think it's worth seeing. Even if you don't see it in the cinema, make sure you get it on Blu-ray, rent it, check it out. Even if you don't think it's worthy of going to the theater to see, check it out on video, check it out on Blu-ray when it comes out. I think you'll really be impressed that it's better than a lot of people would have expected for a solo Venom film. I don't think a lot of people expected it to be this good, and that's why it's getting a lot of the good positive fan reaction that it's getting. Okay, so until next we meet, this is Johnnie Torch reminding you, we are Venom. And I'll be with you again real soon.